Hey there, it's Carly with the Expat Focus podcast. If this is your first time listening, welcome. We aim to make moving and living abroad easier, with episodes packed full of helpful advice and insights from expats from all over the world. We also have a website, it's expatfocus.com, and there you'll find destination guides, useful articles, and you can also sign up for our monthly free newsletter. If you can't find what you're looking for, please let us know. We're Expat Focus on social media. Today's guest is sharing her experience in applying for Dutch citizenship. For Akanksha Pathania, it was a big decision, not least because becoming a citizen of the Netherlands required her to renounce her Indian citizenship. Find out what the process entailed, how you can best prepare for the exams, and why for Akanksha, becoming Dutch has been worth it. Akanksha, I'd like to start with your expat story. So you're originally from India. Can you tell me how you ended up moving to the Netherlands?
So I was living in Canada at the time in Toronto, and I was just sick of the snow, honestly. And my sister was living in Amsterdam, and she invited me to like visit her, and we decided to do like a small Euro trip. And when I traveled to Amsterdam for the first time, I was like, oh my God, this is not what I imagined in my head at all, because it's so different from North America. And while I was, visiting her, I was obviously venting about how much I hated snow. So she recommended that I apply for jobs here and see if I can move here. And that's what I did. I got a job here and I moved here about 7 years ago, and I've never looked back.
I love that you mentioned that you hated snow, but I'm pretty sure it does snow in the Netherlands, doesn't it?
It does, but it's a nice thing. It's a special event when it snows. You don't have like months of snow.
Okay, it's
And
different level in Canada then.
yeah, and I think also because I was a student, so I was just struggling to get to uni in snow, which was not a pleasant memory for me. Also, I hadn't lived in snow ever before that in my life, so I chose the rain over the snow.
So when you first came to Amsterdam, I assume you were on some kind of visa?
Yeah, when I moved here for work, I was on a work sponsored visa, which is like a work permit for the company I work for in Amsterdam. But it also opens up travel within the Schengen region, because you can still travel to any of the Schengen countries without another visa.
And so how long were you living here on a visa before you decided to look into becoming Dutch?
I think I had been living here for about 4 years before I started thinking of becoming a Dutch national, something like that, because I was reading up about the immigration process, and you have to be living here for 5 years in order to be eligible to become a Dutch national. So I started a bit early on. So initially, when I was living here, the first 2 3 years, I was like, yeah, I don't think I want to learn Dutch. It's too difficult. And I think as an adult, I was certainly embarrassed of learning a new language and making mistakes.
I can relate to
Uh,
that.
and then at work, we had Dutch classes during work hours. And I was like, well, now there's literally no excuse. I don't have to travel. It's during work hours. And I could do it with like colleagues who I got along with really well. So it was just like a fun experience that I was doing. That's how I started. And then I realized that I could make sense of my mail a little bit better instead of just using Google Translate. So that certainly made things easier. And yeah, that's how I started. I think by the time I started learning Dutch, it had been 4 years. And if you have been living here for 5 years and you have a job, you can apply for naturalization. You just need to speak the language and write the exams. So, yeah, I started doing that, totally not believing that I could write the exams or pass the exams. But I think I was just doing it I was half assing it, if I can say that. Yeah.
And then you were like, well, I've been here sort of long enough. I've been learning Dutch anyway.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of time for me to consider whether I go for naturalization for citizenship.
Yeah, being an Indian citizen, I had to get a visa for any country that I wanted to visit. But in the Schengen area, it was kind of easy because I had a EU work permit, except for the UK. And I had to go to the UK a lot for work, and that was always annoying because they'd be like, "Okay, can you just move away from the line? I need to check your visa." So
Mm.
I think that was one of the annoying things that I was like, "Ah, why do they have to be so discriminatory? Like, just I have
Yeah.
a legit visa." So I think for immigration, yeah, for travel, that was one of the main reasons.
So it was less because you felt like an affinity with the Netherlands and loved the cheese and the clogs or something like that.
Actually, I do love Amsterdam. I really do. I think it's so international. Like, you come across so many different cultures, and people are really open-minded, and they just let you get on with your life. And so I was like, yeah, I want to stay in Amsterdam for longer. So that was definitely a motivator as well. But was also never made to feel like an outsider because I couldn't speak Dutch.
Yeah, I have found I've been to Amsterdam a few times, and every time I'm really impressed with how welcoming the people are. And there isn't any kind of snobbery or
No.
expectation that I mean, obviously, in any country you go to, you should try with the local language, but it's
Mhm.
not like they hold it against you that you can't speak Dutch and they just happily flip to English and nothing's a problem. And I
Yeah.
found that really welcoming and positive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what I meant. Like I do like the Netherlands and Amsterdam, but yeah, I also didn't feel like I had to do it because, I wasn't I don't know, blending in or getting along with the locals here.
So you were already learning Dutch thanks to classes at work. When you started really looking into what you needed to do for Dutch citizenship, what else did you find out about, what the criteria was?
So when I started looking at the process, I have to say that another friend of mine was going through it as well, and I was just like, let's just see if we can do it together. So that was a huge help. So I think that that's going to be my recommendation. If you can find a friend or someone who's also going through a similar process. Also, if you're learning the language, I think it really helps because you have similar experiences, or you can at least talk about what you're going through. The factors that I considered were how long the process is going to take in terms of eligible to apply for citizenship. So it's 5 years in the Netherlands, how many exams I had to write. And I believe it was like 5 exams and then one interview.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and how difficult the exams were going to be. So I think when I wrote the naturalization exams, you could write them if you were A2 level, if you were, comfortable with A2 level of Dutch. Because I was looking at it from a point of view of also immigration, what would happen to my Indian citizenship? And I actually had to give up my citizenship. So I hadn't decided at that point if I would become a naturalized citizen or if I could just get a permanent residency in the Netherlands. Because the process of writing exams is the same for both those scenarios. It's just up to you once you pass all of the exams, whether you want to become a citizen or just a resident.
It's a really big decision, I feel like, to essentially renounce part of your identity. Like, was that a big
Yeah.
deal for you to have to do that?
100%. I think I was on an emotional roller coaster the whole time. I think first I had convinced myself that I won't give up my citizenship. I'll just be a
Become a
resident.
permanent resident, yeah.
Yeah. And then when I realized that if I become a permanent resident, I still have to be back in the Netherlands every 5 years, or like, I don't know, give them proof that I've been living here, something like that, that basically needs to be renewed. And I personally hate doing paperwork. So I was more motivated by the fact that I can't do this every 5 years, have this thing hanging over my head, that I have to come back or just be inconvenienced. But it was very hard for me. I think when I was finally giving up my Indian citizenship, it felt a bit sad. Like I would definitely was giving up my identity. What if I couldn't move back home? So at that point, I started making sure that I could finish immigration processes so that I could actually go back home and become a permanent resident of India. So it was, I guess, the situation was flipped.
You've essentially become a Dutch citizen.
Yeah.
Uh, And you're a permanent resident in India, so that's how you're able to keep a foot in India, essentially.
I'm going through that process right now. So I'm just going through my application process for becoming a permanent resident in India, and I'm halfway through. So, yeah, because I guess this whole thing took a really long time. Once you become a citizen and you have your new passport, that's when you can start to renounce your Indian citizenship.
Wow. And what are the implications of that? What is the difference between, excuse my ignorance, being a permanent resident of a country and being an actual citizen? What does it change for you if you decide to go back and live in India?
So I can speak from, I guess, what I know about the situation in India. Like if you're a permanent resident versus a citizen, I think the difference is that you can't vote in elections, if I'm not wrong, and you can't own farmland. You can buy property, I guess, residential property. So that's sort of the main difference. And in the Netherlands, I don't know. I do know that the Netherlands actually allows for dual citizenship, but then it depends on your country of origin, like if they allow or not. And India, unfortunately, doesn't allow.
So you've made this big decision. You're studying up for everything you need to do, and you're working full time at the same time. I imagine that was quite a load.
It definitely was. It definitely was quite a heavy, stressful period. I'd say. I will not lie. I think there were times when I was like, oh my God, I don't know why I'm doing this. I should just stop. It's too stressful. But I managed to pull through. I think the one thing that I would tell myself is that it's okay. And if you fail an exam, you can just write it again. You don't have to, get in the mindset of, oh my God, I failed. That's so bad. It's not school.
They
Doesn't
will
really
let you
matter.
sit it again.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like a measure of my progress. I'm also working a full-time job, so I don't need to stress out about too many things. Yeah, I would advise that maybe um, take some time off. Like if you're writing exams, but I didn't do that actually. I would just go to work and then take an hour off and go and write my exam and then come back and start working. And because there are 6 exams, so I think I had like tests scheduled over a period of 2 months or something. So those
Gosh.
2 months, it was just like, oh my God, okay, now I'm done with one exam and I have to prep for the next one.
Okay, so
So it
tell me
was,
what these exams were. You've obviously got the language test. How's your Dutch these days?
oh my God, in the pandemic, it has completely gone to shit. Uh, Also because I'm working at a place where there's like almost, I think, 80% expats and none of them speak Dutch. I think I speak the most Dutch. So it has been hard.
Yeah, to keep it up.
And to keep it up, yeah. And we had Dutch classes at work, but because of pandemic, they aren't happening because I would like to continue learning Dutch. I had already advanced to B1 level, which is, I think, sort of like professional. So you are supposed to write your CV and apply for jobs. So that kind of practice. I don't trust myself with Dutch at work because I guess I always have this sense of just to make sure that I got everything that's happening, and I feel like I'm not there with Dutch yet. But in terms of the exams, so there are 6 exams. So there's writing, reading, speaking, I think listening as well, and Dutch culture. And then the sixth one is it's sort of like an interview, mostly for people who haven't had a full time job for the entire period of 5 years that they've been living here. But if you have had a full time job, you can also get an exemption from it. I, however, actually took that exam because the
You're a
exemption would
glutton
have
for punishment.
I know. The exemption was actually taking longer and I would have to wait longer. And I just wanted to get done with the process. So I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'll just take the exam.
Give me number 6. Yeah.
Yes. And everyone, like the interviewers for this like sixth exam, they were super sweet and they made me feel really comfortable. So that was another thing. Even while I was, going to the place where we had to write exams, like I never felt like they were being discriminatory and everybody was being like super sweet because you're obviously stressed out and they see that, the organizers and the invigilators. So yeah, everything was like quite chilled out. They made me feel like it's okay. I'm already doing my best.
So I'm curious, you said you had reading, writing, speaking, listening exams to test your Dutch. What level of Dutch language did you need to get through that?
I believe the requirement for these exams is A2 level. So A1 is really elementary, and by A2 you sort of understand like tenses, sentence formation, etc.
Okay, so that's doable for most people.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, with the Dutch classes that I was taking, I had already progressed to I think I was just starting B1, but I wasn't the greatest Dutch student. So I think that helped. The fact that maybe I knew that I'm already at B1. There's also loads of practice tests available online on the IND's website. IND is like the immigration association or whatever, the department in Netherlands, and that's where you have to register for all of these exams, etc. And they have loads of practice tests, so that really helped because I could test and I knew like what my level of Dutch was, or what I needed to score in order to pass. That was definitely helpful.
So I'm curious about the culture test because here in France, I haven't gone
Hmm.
for a French nationality yet, but I hear
Hmm.
that they can throw really big curveballs at you, like who was the arts minister in 1985, or what
Wow.
football team won the World Cup in 1992, or like really random questions. And so it's really hard to prepare for that and know, like you have to study everything essentially. What did you do to prepare, and what was your culture test like?
First of all, that sounds insane. Like that you have to sort of read everything, especially because I don't follow football at all. So already sounds like a nightmare for me. But actually, the culture exam here is not that difficult. It's very reasonable. There's a bit about history, about the houses of government here, a little bit of geography, and nothing insane like who was a minister in the 80s or something like that. It's more about your general knowledge about Dutch culture, the healthcare system, the education system. So in a way it's also really practical, which is exactly how Dutch culture is. So things that you would need to know if you were going to settle down in the Netherlands, know what the unemployment bureau is, how do you go there, how to sign up for health insurance, how do doctors work, things like that. And there's loads of books available to study for that exam, and it wasn't that hard,
So it
I
sounds
have
like
to
they
say.
really testing you on how you're able to get by independently in society, which is so useful.
Exactly. I felt like the point of the exam was to sort of make sure that you're self-sufficient and you can get around and find things for different situations in life when you're having kids or when you're applying for jobs, when you're looking for schools, etc. Things like that.
And so you mentioned that you were going to skip the sixth exam, but the exemption process was taking longer than if you just done it. So how long did your process take from start to finish to get your Dutch nationality?
If I only consider the day I took my first exam until I wrote my last one, I think was about 3 months. And then I had to wait for the result for another 3 months or something like that. And once you get that, that's when you apply for Dutch citizenship, which took me a year because once I applied for for Dutch nationality, it takes about an year to process your application, which was further complicated by the pandemic.
Mm.
So I received it last year.
And while you're going through that process, are you allowed to leave the country?
Yeah, yeah, you can. So as long as you have a valid visa or like a work permit or a resident permit, you can. I had mine until April of this year, so it was fine for me to travel, thankfully.
And so now you have a shiny new Dutch passport?
I do. I finally got it this year. And it was, yeah, what blew my mind was how much faster it was compared to like what I'm used to being from India. And I don't want to like talk bad about India. Maybe it's just in New Delhi that it's so busy. But yeah, it was like a week the day I got my citizenship. And I waited because I had to travel. And then the day I applied for my passport, I think it was about 5 days, which was insane because I think for an Indian passport, it takes about a month or two.
Yeah, that's very efficient. I
Yeah.
know when my dad in Australia became an Australian citizen, He had to go to a ceremony and take an oath, and he was given a little tree, a native
Mhm.
Australian tree. Did you have to do anything like that, or did you get a gift? Did you get a block of cheese or something?
I would have loved to. And actually, there is a similar process here. Like you're invited to the city hall and you take an oath, and then you're presented with like your certificate or like, your document, whatever. But because of the pandemic, it was all scrapped,
Oh
unfortunately.
no, not even a Zoom ceremony.
No, actually, nothing. I guess they were just like really busy at City Hall.
Yeah, a few
So,
other priorities.
yeah, exactly. And it was, I think we had like a pretty big peak of COVID as well in April. So there was like nothing happening. So they sent it by post, and I was like, okay, then I guess I'll just celebrate with my friends. So that was sort of it.
We spoke earlier, Akanksha, about the practicalities of having Dutch nationality compared to when you're traveling on an
Mhm.
Indian passport. I'm wondering what difference has becoming Dutch made to your life?
Unfortunately, I mean, I was super excited to travel, but I haven't since I got my passport 2 months ago because there's like still so many
Hashtag
regulations in
COVID. Yeah.
place. Yeah, but I am planning to travel. I think the difference has been I know that I'm thinking of changing jobs right now, and like that's not going to impact my consideration because employers do ask if you're a Dutch citizen or not. And I don't know about other countries, but in the Netherlands, you sort of have to say to the government that you can't find a resource, a local resource, and that's why you're sponsoring an expat. So
Hmm.
that was always a consideration for me as well. That if I'm applying for a job, I have to upfront tell the prospective employers that I'm not a citizen, so they'll have to sponsor me
Yeah.
and things like that.
And generally,
Uh,
third country nationals might be further down the employment list than Dutch or European citizens
yeah,
prioritizing for jobs, for example.
definitely. Not thinking about the paperwork that you have to go through every year to renew your visa, or like, every couple of years, because your visa only lasts for, I think, 5 years. Like that's the highest that they give you in the Netherlands. And I don't have to go through that process. So it's definitely a relief. And that I can travel without getting visas to other countries as well. I remember when I went to Morocco 2 years ago, I couldn't believe that I needed a visa for Morocco because in my head, I was just like, I'm sure that I'll be allowed in Morocco without a visa. And it wasn't a straightforward process either. So the fact that I don't have to deal with all of that is a huge relief.
So, having gone through the process and those 6 tests yourself, what advice would you give others thinking about starting to apply for their Dutch nationality?
I would say write the exams as soon as possible, like start learning Dutch. I was super scared of learning Dutch and I'm not great at it, but it wasn't a very hard language, honestly. And you do have quite a few good teachers. The reason I was saying write them as soon as possible is in the Netherlands, you can write the exams any point once you've moved here at any point. You can only apply for citizenship after living here for 5 years. So I think that's really good as well. You can just sort of write the exams and be done with it. I think the
Hmm.
scores are valid for a certain period of time. I don't remember, a year or 2 years. It'll be great if you can find a study buddy. That really, really helped me. I think if I was going through this process alone, I would have been more stressed out than I was. That really helped. And at the end of the day, it's just a naturalization process. So don't get too stressed out about it. Like my out was, I can always write it again. So I don't care if I fail this one. Of course, in terms of study material, like the culture exam, I think that's the one that most people feel is the tricky one. So maybe get a few practice tests before you start studying just for context. That really helped me because then I didn't feel like I needed to learn about everything. It narrowed the syllabus down, I guess.
Finally, Akanksha, what are some things that you really love about the Netherlands?
I love the canals. Oh my God, the city is so pretty every season, especially in fall. The fact that the entire city, Amsterdam, is connected by canals and you can get from one point to the other on a boat is insane. People are really nice. There's loads of different cultures. I love the coffee culture, and by that I don't mean weed. I mean like people are coffee snobs here. Like around the corner, there's loads of great cafes, and you can always find a good cup of coffee. People are very well traveled as well, so I feel like they have a good grasp of other cultures, and they'll usually come to you with a sense of curiosity about to learn more about your culture, which is quite nice. There's always something to do, like there's loads of festivals going on, not in the pandemic, but otherwise,
In
yes.
normal times, yes.
In normal times, yeah. I think I find the size of the city grew on me because I've always lived in like New Delhi or I don't know, Toronto, which are like really big cities. And it was normal to commute for work for like 90 minutes, and it's unheard of in the Netherlands, I think, unless you're doing, I don't know, from Rotterdam to Amsterdam. But otherwise, you can just get around on your bike. And that was like the best thing for me. I could just bike to work and control my schedule in the sense that I don't have to wait for public transport or like worry about traffic too much. It's quite a nice place to live in.
Well, Akanksha, congratulations on becoming Dutch. And thank you so much for having this chat today to share your experience with Expat Focus.
Thanks for having me, Carly.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to check out our other interviews with expats and experts from all over the world. You'll find them at expatfocus.com, on YouTube, and on your favourite podcast app. You can follow or subscribe to never miss an episode, and I'll catch you next time.